So my name is Molinary. I'm an intern at Faith Assembly in Orlando. I'm studying to be a pastor and just to take on like a missionary status. I felt God called me to be a missionary long time ago, and I'm studying to be that right now. I'm 29 years old, and I'm excited to take on God's call in my life. The way I grew up, my grandfather was basically like my dad. My biological father never married my mom, so he was never in the picture. And I lived with my grandfather and my aunts and uncles. And so like that aspect of family was like my grandfather was my dad, my aunts and uncles were like my brothers and sisters. And he was just an awesome person. He was so smart. He knew like 4 different languages. He knew Spanish, English, Italian, and French. And I remember he was a lawyer. And I remember hearing stories about him going to college at like 17 years old. And that just blew my mind. He was so smart and so awesome. And I just had him as that father figure in my life. I was living with my grandfather. We basically all lived in the same house. He had 7 kids, so it was a full house. I remember one day my mom was like chasing me around the house because I did something bad, and I hid behind him. He's like protecting me from my mom. It's hilarious because she got mad. Sorry, Mom. But living with him was awesome. He was just an intellectual person, and so he was tech savvy. He went from anything from cameras to computers to stuff like that. We had this thing called what was it? Laser discs. I don't know if anybody knows about that, but it's these big things, like they look like records, but it was a DVD the size of a record. And he was like one of the only people in Puerto Rico to own it. And I remember as a little kid going up with this giant DVD, putting it in. My favorite movie was Hook, Peter Pan. I love Peter Pan to this day. And he was just very savvy, like technology-wise. So he collected cameras, VCRs, just like anything technical. He was, I want to say religious, but he was a Christian, and he knew the Bible very well. And that was one of the things I'm very grateful for. He always challenged me, and he challenged me to read it more. And he would just ask me random questions about stories in the Bible. And he would know these things. I'm like, wait, what? So that challenged me to read it more and to grow more. It was probably at the end of last year. He was here and visiting here in Orlando. And before that, he had a doctor's appointment. He had some pains or something. I can't remember like why, but they did a colonoscopy. And he came here, he was visiting, and then he got diagnosed with colon cancer. And immediately, like, we wanted him to stay here, but all his doctors are in Puerto Rico, so he had to fly back and start doing all this chemotherapy and radiation, whatever, I don't know, like, it involved like trying to get rid of it. I guess it grew faster than they thought it would, and he had to get surgery. That was only a few months into it. I didn't think it would end up like it did. I just figured it'd be over and he'd survive and he'd still be here today. But unfortunately, when he went in for surgery, what they were doing was they put in a bag because it got so bad that he couldn't use the bathroom properly. So they had to reroute his intestine to go into a bag. And during the surgery, he had respiratory failure and a heart attack at the same time. So they had to put him into a coma. And at that point is when I had to fly down to Puerto Rico. I had to stop my life here in Orlando, stop internship, and just fly down there because we didn't know what was gonna happen. It was tough seeing him in the hospital, just almost lifeless because he was in a coma. So I got in there and I honestly, when I first walked in there, I couldn't even look at him because I didn't want to see him like the way he was. And then By the second day, I just started talking to him and praying. During that week, we saw improvements that were supposed to, like the doctors were saying, oh, he's getting better. And then one night we went home from the hospital, and as soon as we got home, as soon as we got into bed, we got a phone call that we had to go back to the hospital because something happened. So we got dressed back up, we went to the hospital, and by the time we got there, he had already passed away. It was very tough to see my aunts and uncles hurt, because I mean, that's their father. And I knew exactly what they were going through because I felt like that was my dad too. But in that, I actually got the opportunity to pray with my family for the first time ever being there. And also in that process, I found out that I will be the first pastor in the family. So even through this hard time, like God was there comforting me and comforting our family. My trip to Italy came 2 months after he passed away. How that came about was I actually talked to Pastor Marcos at Faith Assembly. He's the missions director there. And he was showing me the Assemblies of God Wide Open Missions website, which is where all the missionaries basically put in an ad to see if they need help and people apply to go there. And somehow the first thing that popped up was a position in Italy for graphics, audio, and computer stuff, which is all stuff that I know how to do. And so I was like, okay, God, like send me, I'll go. The application process for that takes 2 to 3 months. My application was approved in less than a month for me to go there, and I had interviews with the missionaries there. And in 2 interviews, they're like, okay, we want you to come. I was really excited about it, and then I found out how much money it was. I needed to raise about $8,000 for 2 months to be in Italy because I needed my own apartment and plane ticket and stuff like that. My church, Faith Assembly in Orlando, definitely supported me through the entire process. Pastor Carl let me come up on stage on a Sunday morning, and he introduced me as a missionary and asked the people to help me get there. That's how I raised the majority of the money for going. And yeah, it was 2 months after my grandfather passed away that I was in Italy. While in Italy, there were times where I would just be walking down the street and dreaming of him being next to me and talking. I can just see him talking to random people in Italian and just having these conversations, because it's just the type of person he was. Everywhere he went, he started a conversation with somebody. Doesn't matter if he knew them or not. So it's actually only been 9 months since he passed away. It was definitely very difficult at first. I wouldn't say I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go to Italy, because that just made me want to go even more and see the stuff that he talked about and see where our family came from. It's definitely been difficult thinking back on it now. Like, I could have been bitter, I could have been mad or anything, but God worked in my life somehow that I was able to take that moment around and just be the light to my family and show them, hey, yeah, he passed away, but we still got to find joy in God and find that peace, and that he's now in heaven with his mom, and just everything's good. He's not in pain anymore. He doesn't have cancer. So yeah, the main thing was that I got to be a light to my family in that moment. When you go through something like this, the best thing to do is to keep your head up and not go into those moments where everything's dark and just going through the rabbit hole. Like, that's just not, to me, that's not an option. You have to keep your head up and you have to keep going strong no matter what happens. Being frank to me means being a light. It means showing people that I'm a Christian, but I also go through things, and that I'm not perfect. I am Christian Molinary, and I am Frank.